South Africa is a country of many cultures, with a constitution that guarantees equality in the expression of our private and communal beliefs. But what happens when the rights of groups within these cultures are still not protected by law? Dr. Waheeda Amien is a lawyer, academic and expert in Muslim personal law. She has spent more than a decade working in the field of Muslim women's rights, lobbying for legal recognition of Muslim marriages. Waheeda has taken many leaps of faith to give voice to what she believes in.
Hi Lisa, nice to see you again.
How are you?
Fine, and yourself?
I'm good. I'm glad I've got my lawyer on the spot.
Come inside.
What were you like religiously when you were younger and how that was for you?
Islam has always been a very important component of my life, of my family's life. But I didn't grow up having my parents tell me you have to pray 5 times a day, you have to wear a scarf. I think there was an expectation, implicit expectation, that you're Muslim and so there are certain things you have to do. I was sent to madrasa, as were my brother and sister, and so that foundation was there. But I was definitely brought up in a home where we were encouraged to question. As I was growing up, I never questioned Islam in the way that I would question the injustices that were being perpetrated within South African society. But there was always a sense within me that things were not quite as they should be within our community. There was an expectation that women were meant to be at home taking care of the family, the man would go out and work and bring in the money, and he was the head of the household and she would have to be obedient, subservient. If we went to functions, and this is while I was growing up, that men would be seated separately from women. For me, the law was that mechanism that through which I could address injustice.
So what do we have here?
Some photos of the family when Waheeda was. This is when she was a baby.
She's so tiny.
This is when she was 1 year old. There's a little girl. She was handsful, but she was very bright. She's a Leo. Lion. Lioness.
We allow them to develop their own potential. And that's why they were quite liberal-minded. We didn't bring them up in a sort of a strict conservative atmosphere.
So what were you like as a child?
I've always had an inquiring mind. I've always questioned. I've always been the one to ask why. Ever since I can remember, I mean, I've always been the troublemaker. My mom constantly reminds me about the story where my grandmother's friend would come and visit in Walmer Estate. And I think she says I must have been about 3 or something. And one day I went to her and I said to her, "Why do you keep coming here? Because every time you come here, my mother has to work." Because my mother had to go and make the tea, had to prepare the tea for her.
It was the young activist at work, age 3.
The home that I grew up in was a mixture of Islam and Indian culture. It was at a time where you had multiple families living in one house. My parents, myself and my siblings were in one room. My dad's brother, his wife and their kids in another. The other brother, his wife in another. Other brother downstairs, grandparents across the hall. But also kind of being caught in the middle of being the eldest of siblings. So having that sense of responsibility, I loved it.
Waheeda became politicized in high school, protesting against apartheid during the school boycotts of the 1980s. She completed law at UCT and worked at the legal aid clinic at the University of Western Cape, where she set up a gender desk responding to the cases that were coming in.
We started getting in such a lot of complaints and queries and cases by women from the Muslim community around seeking advice and assistance. You'd have women coming in saying that their husbands were not fulfilling their maintenance obligations. Their husbands had just simply issued talaq against them, which is a unilateral right under Islamic law that a man has to repudiate his wife. It doesn't need anyone's permission for that, and doesn't need any grounds for that. There were women coming in complaining of domestic violence and husbands using religion to justify the domestic violence against them. That's when we started questioning, so what needs to be done?
Waheeda won a scholarship to study for her PhD in Belgium, looking at gender equality and the obstacles faced by women married according to religious rites. But her life was about to change.
Some important things happened to you when you were there.
I went off to Belgium, all excited and raring to go. And I was there for 4 months and I became ill. It was the 1st of August, a Friday, and I was having lunch at home. As I was eating, I just suddenly felt nauseous, and I got up to go to the bathroom. As I was going down the steps to the bathroom, I tripped and I fell into the bathroom. And I remember having an enormous headache, and then suddenly there was this sharp pain shooting through my arms. I just remember that night lying in bed thinking, I so much want my grandmother to come and visit me now. And she'd passed away in 1991. But I was in tears, absolute tears, and the only thing I thought was, I want my grandmother to come and visit me.
It must be terrifying to not know what's going on.
What I went through that weekend was very unsettling, to say the least. I could not understand why I was having a problem speaking, and I concocted the weirdest reason under the sun. And that was that I had been in my apartment for like weeks on end working on my research, not speaking to anyone. And I thought to myself, did my brain somehow forget to speak? Eventually, my colleagues realized something was wrong and got me to hospital. When I got there, an MRI and a CAT scan confirmed that I'd had a stroke, that it was a blood clot in my brain.
The first time it really hit me how bad it might actually be was when I had spoken to her one night and she couldn't string a sentence together. She wasn't coherent. And I put the phone down and I burst into tears.
One or two nights later, I had an experience while I was lying in the hospital bed. I had a sense, I was in bed, but I was also looking at myself. And I had a sense of having a conversation with a higher being. And I was having this conversation very explicitly. I mean, I can visualize it in my mind. And I'm saying that I understand, I'm acknowledging that what is happening to me is beyond my control. I am completely at your will. Whatever happens to me from this point is in your control, and you will make the decision. I have no control, but, and this is the cheeky me coming in, you see, I want you to know I'm not ready to die. I have got lots of things that I still need to do. But I understand that I have no control over whether I'm going to stay or not. I woke up in ICU and the doctors told me that I developed a swelling on my brain during the night. In that moment that I had that conversation with the higher being, in that moment, my faith was reaffirmed.
South African lawyer Waheeda Amien was an up-and-coming academic in the field of Muslim personal law. But at the age of 31, while studying in Belgium, she suffered 2 strokes and had to return home.
There were days when she couldn't comprehend what was happening. I just looked at her and there were tears streaming down her face. And I'm not used to seeing my sister that way. Because she's always been this really strong person, you know, capable, superwoman, capable of anything. When we came back to South Africa, she actually had time to process what had happened in terms of how much her life had changed. That is when she snapped to an extent. She was angry.
You were met with many challenges.
My stroke made me confront the challenging aspects of my personality in a way that I didn't have to confront them previously. There were moments that I would get so frustrated, right, that I would take it out on people around me. It's been a long run, but I mean, I've had to acknowledge that, you know, there are parts of me that certainly need improving upon. And that's one of the lessons that has come through that experience for me. It's that the importance of self-reflection all the time.
So you're human.
So I'm human. But it took a stroke to make me realize it. When I came back, my mother said to me, just remember, you've been given a second chance at life. So make it worthwhile.
What are these ones?
These are when she had a stroke. So we made an album up for her and we sent it through with my daughter.
I remember my mom telling me that there were a lot of people praying for my sister. And my sister telling me in Belgium that she could actually feel those prayers. She could feel that energy from the family in South Africa rooting for her, pulling for her, and saying all sorts of prayers, reading the Quran, making every dua fathomable for her to get better. And she said she could actually feel that. You know, your relationship with God it's one thing. But to be able to feel that manifesting from different people in your family and different people in your life, I think that is an amazing experience in itself.
What was your leap of faith?
Up to the point, or just before I had my stroke, I was struggling with my faith. I have never rejected my identity as a Muslim. I was trying to reconcile my identity as a Muslim, the religion Islam, and the kinds of injustices that were happening within our community. And there have been many times in my life when I've had these arguments with God, and times when I've thought to myself, how can a God actually exist when these kinds of injustices happen? And whenever I doubt myself now, I take myself back to that moment. Because that for me was my affirmation that God exists. That we have a say in what happens in our lives.
It took 4 years before Waheeda had recovered sufficiently. Still, she persevered, finishing her PhD, continuing her work in women's rights, and meeting and marrying her husband Hussein.
The main problem that we're dealing with in South Africa as a Muslim community is that there's no legal recognition of Muslim marriages. Islam is very important to the Muslim community in terms of their identity, which means Islamic law is very important to the Muslim community. Now, that would not be problematic if not for the fact that in the community, some interpretations of Islamic law that are anti-women get prioritized and get applied. Okay, that's cool.
Waheeda continues to lobby for the legal recognition of Muslim marriages. When it came to her own nuptials, she and Hussein decided on both a religious and a civil ceremony.
I will admit, because I've said this to Hussein already, that the night of our first date, I did say to my friend afterwards, I can actually see myself spending the rest of my life with this guy.
So what drew you two?
Well, we had a lot in common. That was very clear. And the most important thing was, the first thing was, where I got all my jokes.
Yeah.
That was very unusual. We had interesting times in the early days as a couple because she's a lawyer, so she's used to arguing for various different things. And she would make a strong, passionate argument about things. I'm a scientist. I believe in absolute logic. The two don't really work together. So if the absolute logic dictates that something is true, the lawyer is not going to convince the scientist.
Where are you going? Yes, Yasmin.
Their wedding ceremony was by no means conventional. They were both present in the mosque, led their own vows, and had a civil ceremony straight after.
I wouldn't have considered myself married until the law thought that I was married.
We were able to do it in a way that expressed our personal faiths and the work that I do. It would be hypocritical for me to get up in the community and preach gender equality, and then, it's very important to me to be able to practice what I'm saying to other people in my own space.
Lawyer and gender rights activist Waheeda Amien has survived 2 strokes and ongoing health problems, but still continues to fight for the rights of Muslim women. Her journey has seen her dig deep into her own faith, finding a place of spiritual and professional fortitude. A Muslim marriages bill drafted almost a decade ago has still not been passed, due to lack of consensus within the Muslim community. And so the lobbying continues.
The Women's Legal Centre had a project where we have done workshops on Muslim marriages in the communities in the broader Western Cape. And I called on Waheeda's expertise as a Sharia expert to join me at these workshops. So we would want those women to know what the Muslim Marriages Bill is about, what the provisions are, how they will protect women, and we want to know, are they happy with the protections that are in this bill?
Islam makes available to women a number of rights. But the problem is that for those ulama that a woman approaches for relief and who really sincerely wants to come to her aid and to make the rights under Islamic law available to her, their difficulty lies in the fact that when they make a ruling in favor of a woman, it's not legally enforceable. We've had instances where women find themselves in physically abusive relationships, or their husbands are not maintaining them, and they go and apply for a fasakh, and the ulama will tell them, go back and see if you can try and make things work with your husband. If the Muslim Marriages Bill were to be enacted and a wife finds herself in a position like that, she'd be able to show that she has clear grounds, and a court would then grant the fasakh.
Waheeda's work continues with ongoing challenges and resistance from many quarters, sometimes translating into personal threats bent on discouraging her.
When the media tried their luck with Islamophobic sentiment, we made them crumble like a rock into dust. Any outside interference will be met with severe consequences. You have 5 hours from the start of daylight tomorrow to explain yourselves. When I heard it, it was like a shock went through me. And I immediately realized that for me there was a sense of danger. There was a sense that I could potentially be under threat. we decided that we can't allow these kinds of reactions to prevent us from continuing to do our work.
We've had the obstacles where, because the communities are small, women were reluctant to come because there would be the stigma that they had a problem. To make a private issue a public issue takes a lot of courage on the part of the woman. We also had issues where women weren't encouraged to come by their husbands. It's a first step so that women can absorb what is being told to them, can identify that they're not the only ones that are going through it, and that can also identify that they have help.
It takes a very strong person to be able to stand up to a community and say, I don't agree with your interpretation of Islam or the Quran or Hadith. And putting yourself in the line of fire like that, it can't be easy. But she does it, and she does it with finesse, and she does it with strength, and she does it with vigor.
Why is a fighter? I think that's probably something that comes through very, very strongly. And thankfully, I get to not be on the other side of the fighter.
It's not easy doing what you're doing. Not everybody agrees with what you're doing. It takes incredible resilience.
I speak about being under attack, and then I realized that maybe I need to listen to those voices. I think there are members of religious bodies in our community who are really genuinely, sincerely trying to do good work. And they're struggling as well. And then there are those who are quite extremist, who really firmly probably believe in their views. So for me, I think I've moved into a space where I'm trying to listen to those different voices. I would love to live in a society where we share spaces as men, as women, and we share power as men and women. And so I'm recognizing the need as women to start sitting down and engaging and dialoguing, not just with each other, but with the men in our community as well. I like the fact that I'm on a continuous journey of learning, and that I see the benefit in kind of constantly reflecting.